And now that we are done talking about the UFC 309 main event between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic, let's get into the rest of the card, and it starts with the 5-round co-main event between Michael Chandler and Conor. Oopsies. Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, Part 2. The rematch that absolutely nobody asked for, but absolutely no one will complain about. It doesn't really get much more fun than Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. All you have to do is go back to May 15th of 2021, and for 5 minutes and 19 seconds, they put on one of the most exciting fights that you will ever see before Charles Oliveira finished Michael Chandler very, very early on into that second round. Round number 1, Michael Chandler nearly puts Charles Oliveira's away numerous times. Charles Oliveira nearly puts Michael Chandler out numerous times. Oh my goodness, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of Noah's all-time favorite fights. And again, it's a nice quick watch. 5 minutes and 19 seconds, you can go about your merry way after you get done watching this. So here we are again now. Both have went their separate ways. Charles Oliveira, that was a title fight with Michael Chandler. He would then go on to face Dustin Poirier, defend his title there. He would then go on to beat Justin Gaethje. Technically, it wasn't a title defense because of the weight miss, all that jazz that was going on. Then he went on to lose to Islam Makhachev, bounce back by beating Beneil Dariush, and in 2024 had a number one contender fight. Well, kind of a number one contender fight because now he's kind of in another number one contender fight. Anyway, against Arman Tsarukyan, a very close fight at UFC 300, a split decision where we saw Arman Tsarukyan continue to build upon his amazing win streak. It looks as though Arman will be facing Islam Makhachev in January, as of right now, in California for the lightweight title. And the winner here of Chandler versus Oliveira 2 will get the winner of Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev 2. And for Michael Chandler, he would then go on in November of 2021 to lose to Justin Gaethje in an absolute banger, one of the best fights of that entire year, the fight of the night for that card in Madison Square Garden. Then bounce back by knocking out Tony Ferguson brutally, may I add, in May of 2022 with that front kick knockout. And then the last time that we've seen Michael Chandler compete was November 12th, 2022. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago to the day that I'm recording this, on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, where he got submitted by Dustin Poirier in the third round of their fight. And that is it. It will now be over 2 full years since we've seen Michael Chandler last in the octagon. That really is kind of crazy to think about, isn't it? It doesn't feel like 2 years have passed since Chandler has fought. He has, to his credit, remained very, very relevant by being a coach on The Ultimate Fighter in 2023, being scheduled to face the notorious Conor McGregor 17 times, most recently scheduled to main event International Fight Week in June at UFC 303 before Conor McGregor had to pull out of that fight due to a broken toe. In stepped, of course, the face of the UFC at the moment, Alex Pereira, where he would defend his title for the second time of 2024. We've since seen him defend it a third time. The fighter of the year is Poatan Alex Pereira, but that's a discussion for a different day. Michael Chandler is now back for the first time in over 2 years, and he will enter against a former opponent, someone who finished him in a championship fight, Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, the all-time leader in finishes and the all-time leader in submissions in the UFC's history, regardless of weight class. In 31 fights, Michael Chandler has gone the distance 8 total times, and in the UFC, in his 5 fights, he's only gone the distance once. And for Charles Oliveira, holy moly, this right here is absolutely crazy because he has 45 professional fights. Only gone the distance 5 total times. Both guys are by no means a spring chicken. Michael Chandler, now 38 years old, lost the last 2 years of his career waiting for Conor McGregor, and Charles "Do Bronx" is 35, so just on the outside, or maybe the end of, I should say, those prime years. Charles Oliveira's title run and his path to becoming the champion was one of the most astonishing runs that we've seen in the UFC's history, especially in this historic, very important lightweight division. Many would still say that it is the main division in the UFC. Now, I, of course, really love the bantamweight division. Welterweight's on fire. Middleweight's even kind of churning up right now. Every division is cooking, and that is why the UFC, as an organization, is also cooking as we head into the end of 2024 and into the start of 2025. Charles Oliveira, man, what more can you say about the guy, Du Bronx, from the favelas, getting the special fight kit shorts for this weekend, as is Michael Chandler, as is Stipe Miocic, as is John Jones. How about that? The UFC and Venom really bringing out the special shorts a lot lately, but Du Bronx has the favelas all over his trunks. Reminded me of the Modern Warfare 2 map from Call of Duty way back in the day. Oh my goodness. As I said, the rematch that no one saw coming, no one asked for it, but who's going to complain about this? Because you know that it's not going 25 minutes. You almost know it's not going 15 minutes. You borderline know it may not even go 5 full minutes. And the stakes are high in this one. Charles Oliveira, in a number one contender fight, lost it to Arman Tsarukyan, but gets another opportunity to get right back in there for a title fight again if he can beat Michael Chandler for a second time. And for Michael Chandler, the clock is not on his side, and he will say as such. He said it from the very beginning when he debuted and knocked out Dan Hooker in Abu Dhabi. He said he's not here for a long time. He's here for a good time. And through his 5 UFC fights that we've seen, he has absolutely delivered on that promise. It's a shame that we've missed 2 years of Michael Chandler's career at the ages of 36 and 37, because we know the lower the weight class, the harder it gets, the older that you get. I'm by no means saying that if Michael Chandler loses here, it's going to be the last time we see him in the UFC octagon, but I do think it may be the last time that we see him in this lightweight division. And do we actually ever get the Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor fight? Maybe that depends on the result of this one here, because if Chandler wins and is essentially guaranteed a title fight, surely he takes the title fight over Conor McGregor, right? Right? But the finances, from what we've heard from all of Conor McGregor's past opponents, he may just choose to face a guy with the name of Conor McGregor before getting the opportunity to fight for that UFC title. But that is something that Chandler has made very clear. He will not retire, or at least he does not want to retire, before getting that gold belt wrapped around his waist like he had happened to him in Bellator. So we will see what will happen here. We know that Charles Oliveira has gotten stronger and stronger over the years on the feet, has very, very nasty power. I mean, he did knock out Michael Chandler at the end of the day, but 21 submissions on his resume. We know how he wants to get those fights done. And for Michael Chandler, a very highly touted grappler and wrestler. Tons of collegiate success, tons of success with his wrestling in his mixed martial arts career, but we haven't really seen him use it very much in the UFC. Will he look to change it up here in the rematch with Oliveira? You would think he has to do something a little bit different to find success this go-round. Give me your predictions for Oliveira versus Chandler 2, and if you do feel it is a true number one contender fight to face the winner of Arman Tsarukyan versus Islam Makhachev, again slated to happen in January of 2025. We're done with the main event, we're done with the co-main event, now let's get into the featured bout and, of course, get into the rest of this card as well. A great card. The pay-per-view card, of course, is super solid. I mean, the top two, it doesn't get much better than that, but now, Bo Nickal versus Paul Craig, the biggest jump up in competition for Bo Nickal. A top 15 matchup in the women's flyweight division, a division that is continually moving with young up-and-comers and veterans. We'll talk about that one, and we'll talk about some of the other fights. Don't get me wrong, it's solid, as I just said. The pay-per-view card is stacked, a very slept-on fight, kicking off the pay-per-view card with Mauricio Ruffy. Got to think they put him on that pay-per-view opener because of the success of the Fighting Nerds and their team that they are having right now. So there's definitely some other good fights to get into here. But in terms of in-depth storylines, what's at stake, rankings, we got to start here. Bo Nickal, Paul Craig, again, the biggest step up that we've seen for the 28-year-old, 3-time national champion wrestler out of Penn State University. 6 victories to his name, 0 defeats. All 6 of his professional MMA bouts are by way of finish. Most recently, UFC 300 back in April, he got the second round submission over Cody Brundage, the first time that we had seen Bo Nickal exit the first round in his MMA career. As a matter of fact, the longest fight for him prior to Cody Brundage was against Jamie Pickett, and it was 2 minutes and 54 seconds. We know the pedigree that Bo Nickal has. We know the hype that he had from his professional debut in Jorge Masvidal's MMA promotion to 2 separate fights in 2022 on Dana White's Contender Series to now a 2-0 year in 2023 and what he is hoping to be a 2-0 year in 2024, facing someone who was a perennial top 15 guy in the light heavyweight division, Paul Craig, transformed into a 185-pound fighter who at one point was in the rankings, now is not. He is 1-2 in this weight class. He started with a finish over Andre Muniz. That was back in July of last year, but has now lost back-to-back fights, both by finish, but look who it is against. Brendan Allen was on an insane win streak prior to his loss to Nassourdine Imavov just a little bit ago. And in May of this year at UFC 301 in Brazil, he goes into enemy territory and faces a fighting nerd, Caio Borralho, and he got knocked out in the second round. Caio Borralho now ranked in the top 5, coming off of a fight of the year contender against Jared Cannonier. So he's facing the best of the best in the top 10 of the middleweight division. Now, technically for him, getting a pretty big step back if you want to talk name value. Well, maybe not name value, but competition-wise. But all in all, if you want to look at the last 5 fights for Paul Craig, only one victory dating back to July 23rd of 2022. He's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. The last 2 losses in the light heavyweight division were to Volkan Oezdemir via decision and a knockout loss to Johnny Walker in January of 2023. But regardless of the losses that Paul Craig is having, it is still a big step up in competition for Bo Nickal, someone who's been in there against the who's who of the light heavyweight division, and through 3 fights at middleweight, been in there with some very, very high-level guys. Meanwhile, Bo Nickal's biggest fight was Cody Brundage, who doesn't have the, biggest of names and definitely doesn't have the greatest of resumes if we want to talk UFC experience. And even still, Bo Nickal coming into this fight around a minus 1,000 favorite. And this is on Tuesday, so that could even grow potentially heading into Saturday. Of course, it could shrink as well, but I don't see it coming down any at this point. I see it going up. Bo Nickal, the hype is real with this guy. I think here with a win over Paul Craig, he could get his first crack at a ranked middleweight, and that's of course a middleweight discussion. I don't want to look past the Bear Jew out of Scotland that is Paul Craig, but it is an uphill battle. I think you'd be remiss to not say that it is an uphill battle for Paul Craig. What will Bo Nickal do here against someone who is known for their grappling and for their jiu-jitsu? That is what I think makes this fight most intriguing. Can the skills of Paul Craig on the ground make this fight go a little bit longer? Will it make Bo Nickal want to maybe stay on the feet a little bit more than what we are used to? Therefore, giving us as fans the opportunity to see the evolution and increments that Bo Nickal is improving his skills and his all-around mixed martial arts game. Those are the biggest questions here for me in this featured bout. Next, we go to the women's flyweight division, where the number 11 ranked Karine Silva will be taking on the number 9 ranked Viviane Araujo. For Viviane, she's lost 3 of her last 4 fights coming into this one. Fought back in February against Natalia Silva, someone who, in my opinion, is a future UFC champion, hands down, bar none. And if you want to look outside of that, look, it's all about who she's fighting. It's a win over Jennifer Maia. It's a loss to Amanda Ribas, who's ranked in 2 different weight classes. It's a loss to Alexa Grasso, who went on to become the champion in this division. A loss to Caitlin Chookagian even. Jessica Ai, she's beaten Montana De La Rosa. She's beaten Roxanne Modafferi. She's beaten Andrea Lee. She's fought a very, very good resume's worth of fighters in this women's flyweight division. But Karine Silva, she's built different. She has stats that you don't really see in this division or in women's mixed martial arts in general, because coming in here, she is 18-4, only seen the scorecards twice in 22 fights, and of her 18 victories, 17 of them are by way of stoppage. She's a 2021 Dana White Contender Series alum. She is 4-0 in the UFC. 3 of those victories are by way of submission, and her biggest victory is in April of this year, where she beat Ariane Lipski, now Ariane da Silva, via decision. She's absolutely in her prime right now at 30 years old, fighting out of Brazil. A big opportunity here to enter the top 10 against someone who's fought the who's who of this women's flyweight division over the last 5 years. I think this is a big test for Karine to show just how not good she is, but how well-rounded she is, because Viviane Araujo is a dog. She is in wars. Just look at her fight that she had with Amanda Ribas, toe-to-toe for 15 minutes in that fight. She's good everywhere. Not necessarily great in any one particular area, but solid everywhere, and that is, I think, a big test for Karine Silva, because Ariane Lipski wants to get the fight down to the ground, looks for the finish, wants submissions. Here, Viviane can get a victory anywhere that the fight goes, but 37 years old, as I alluded to when I was introing her stats here. How much time does she have left? Pair that with losing 3 of her last 4. You gotta think she's feeling some added pressure here, and Karine Silva is riding an absolute high. 2 polar opposites in terms of career momentum for UFC 309 in this women's flyweight bout. And kicking off the pay-per-view card is a member of the Fighting Nerds, Mauricio Ruffy, looking to continue the momentum that Caio Bahaio had against Jared Cannonier, looking to continue the momentum that just last week Carlos Prates had by knocking out Neil Magny and entering the top 15 of the welterweight division. Here now in the lightweight division, Mauricio Ruffy is 1-0 in the UFC, is a Dana White Contender Series alum from last October, 10-1 overall. All 11 of his fights have ended by way of knockout. The 28-year-old Ruffy is taking on the 25-year-old James Llontop, who is 14-4, 8 finishes to his name. He's coming off of back-to-back losses, however, since entering the UFC. So look at this. A 2023 Contender Series alum in Ruffy, who has a ton of momentum and is riding a high, and a 2023 Contender Series alum who is 0-2 in the UFC. Losses to Chris Padilla via submission and Slava Claus Vyacheslav Borshev back in August via split decision. Prior to his 0-2 skid, however, in the UFC, James was on a 12-fight win streak, and many of those by way of knockout. Can he bounce back here? Just 25, but a lot of pressure, because if you start your UFC career 0-3, odds are you may not get an opportunity to have a 4th fight, at least immediately. He may have to go back to the regional scene and earn his way back up. So tons of pressure on the shoulders of James Llontop, and Mauricio Ruffy, my goodness, he's going to come down the entry ramp with those glasses on, ready to put on a show for the Fighting Nerds. Next, we move to the prelims, and oh my goodness, my pick for fight of the night is the prelim headliner. It is the number 13 ranked bantamweight in the world, Jonathan Martinez, coming off of his loss to Jose Aldo back at UFC 301, but prior to that, had tallied off 6 straight victories. He will look to get back in the win column, but it will have to come against the 3-0 fighter in the UFC, that is Marcus McGhee, one of my favorite fighters going in the organization right now. 3 fights in the UFC, 3 finishes, 9-1 overall, never seen the judges' scorecards. Oh my goodness. This fight right here is violent. This fight right here gets the moniker that we used to throw around all the time back in the day on this show: beautiful chaos. Jonathan Martinez, 30 years old, right in his prime, 19-5 with 11 finishes overall, and didn't start his UFC career all that good. Been in the company since 2018, but if you want to take a look here, he started out with a loss, then won 2 in a row, then lost, then won 2 in a row, but then lost to Davey Grant. But again, that's when he went on that insane 6-fight win streak, finishes over Adrian Yanez, finishes over Cub Swanson, victories over Said Nurmagomedov. I mean, he was beating a very, very good list of fighters in this bantamweight division. Went up against a returning Jose Aldo at UFC 301, and let's be honest, Aldo turned back the clock. Jose Aldo looked incredible back in Brazil that evening. Now Jonathan Martinez is back, and he's taking on someone that is so entertaining, so fun to watch fight, the 34-year-old maniac Marcus McGhee, fighting out of the same gym, or at least has trained with Sean O'Malley out there in Phoenix, Arizona. In those 3 fights in the UFC, it is a submission win over Journey Newsman. It is a knockout over JP Bays, and it is a knockout over Gaston Bolaños, who actually just fought this past weekend and got a victory. That most recent fight was back in January, so pretty big layoff for Marcus McGhee, 9 months to be exact, but he is going to be back and look for his opportunity in just his 4th UFC fight to enter the rankings, but it is not an easy test. Jonathan Martinez is supremely well-rounded and supremely underrated. There are a ton of fighters in this bantamweight division specifically that are highly underrated in my opinion in terms of the grand scheme of the UFC. Jonathan Martinez, if we're talking ranked fighters, is definitely one of them, but can Marcus McGhee enter his name into the bantamweight rankings? And as for the rest of the card, in terms of storylines and what's at stake, not a ton, but there's at least some that I want to give some shine to. Chris Weidman is back, and good on him getting to fight in front of the New York City crowd. He's taking on Eryk Anders. Both fighters are actually 1-0 in 2024. Eryk Anders beat Jamie Pickett back in March, and Chris Weidman beat Bruno Silva back in March as well. That one was a little bit weird, eye pokes, nut shots. I can't quite remember all the controversy, but he did get the decision victory. Technical decision. Jim Miller, the all-time leader in fights, going to have his 45th UFC bout this weekend. He's taking on Damon Jackson. That's a badass fight, guys. I'm not going to lie. I think that's going to be very, very exciting. Jim Miller has proved to be in nothing but barn burners over the last 5 or 6 years of his career. Damon Jackson is a kill or be killed style of fighter. I really like that one. We've got Marcin Tybura, a top 15 ranked heavyweight, taking on Jhonata Diniz. If you don't know, Diniz was actually slated to face Derek Lewis at UFC Vegas 100 last weekend, but that fight, actually it might have been UFC Edmonton now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it was. But regardless, that fight fell through due to an illness on the side of Derek Lewis, but keeping him active here, giving him another chance to fight someone in the rankings that is Marcin Tybura. Tybura is number 9 to be exact, but he is coming into this one after a loss to Sergey Spivak, a submission loss that happened in just 1 minute and 44 seconds back in August. For Diniz, he's a Dana White Contender Series alum from 2023 and made good on his UFC tenure so far, 2-0, both of those victories in 2024, Austin Lane and Carl Williams. So, I mean, this is a huge jump here. He's going from Austin Lane and Carl Williams, no disrespect, but to a number 9 ranked Marcin Tybura, who's quite literally fought every damn ranked heavyweight in the division, it seems like. Big jump for the 8-0 Diniz, but 33 years old, 7 of his 8 victories are by way of knockout. What a catapult this would be for him into the rankings. So give me your thoughts on UFC 309 in the comments below. A stacked card from top to bottom. Plenty of fun fights and storylines to discuss. Give me your predictions. Give me your bets and everything in between down below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, I break down and preview the biggest storylines and best fights heading into each weekend's cards. I also recap the most meaningful results every week and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday, podcast episodes released there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you in the next video.